Okay. Welcome to the May 22, 2023 meeting of the CB6 Land Use and Waterfront Committee. My name is Sandra McKee and I'm the chair of the committee. This meeting is called to order at 7 p.m. Tonight we are joined by District Manager Jesus Perez and Assistant District Manager Brendan Bird, and also Brian Lafferty. Okay, do I need to repeat that? Just for the record, we started our meeting at 7 p.m. And this is the Land Use and Waterfront Committee of CB6. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. As a reminder, New York State law requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last name displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name is not properly displayed, you cannot count towards quorum. We need a volunteer to take tonight's minutes. If you can take minutes, please raise your hand through Zoom. Oh, Susan, thank you. Okay. So Susan will be taking the minutes this evening, and we will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Okay. Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Majed Al-Bulsamad.
Present.
Victoria Binatar.
Present.
Jim Collins.
Here.
John DeRico.
Is excused?
Yes, that's right. He won't be here tonight. And Adam Harkey is also excused. Sandy McKee.
Present.
Rich Mintz.
Present.
Larry Shire.
Present, but I have problem with the camera right now.
Duly noted. Sandra Sherrod.
Present.
Letty Simon.
Present.
Susan Steinberg.
Present.
Gabe Terzo.
Present.
And Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
Present.
Okay. With that, we have a quorum. We have a quorum.
Sorry,
Sandy,
I was muted, sorry.
all good.
The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and appears on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes for the April 24th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting these minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the April 24th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB6 website. For an efficient meeting, we observe the following. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having or to state in writing information, such as an email address, that has already been stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When the committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. One thing, if you could please mute yourselves if you're not recognized or not speaking. So tonight's agenda, first on the agenda is the Carlton Regency Corporation at 132, 136 East 37th Street, known as 281-287 Lexington Avenue, seeks to modify their ground floor access for the arcade to hours pursuant to the zoning resolution and for the installation of fencing in conjunction with the new hours. This is BSA calendar number 241-72-B. And I believe that Aubrey, you're going to be leading off the presentation.
I'm going to start.
Oh, okay, Frederick, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, members of the public, and I first want to thank you for rearranging your agenda to put us first. That is very much appreciated. I will be very brief. We appeared before you last month regarding the change in the hours of operation. There were many concerns that were raised regarding the fencing, as well as the interior layout of the space, what the intended uses were, how we were going to provide various amenities. We understood that. We appreciated the concerns of the community board and the community. We responded in a letter of May 10th, which was sent to you with some revised plans, which showed the fencing, the way the fencing was to be removed during operating hours. And also we showed various amenities provided within the space, particularly seating and tables and discussion of other amenities regarding lighting and decorations, as well as community involvement. What I would like to do is to now, so this is the overall presentation. We're going to make a modification of what we presented last time. Following me will be Connie Miller, who is a member of the board of the Carlton Regency, following which will be Mr. Aubrey Phillips, who is the resident manager or the property manager, who can better discuss what has transpired in the past several weeks regarding community involvement and the concerns they have, as well as their understanding of the concerns the community has with regard to this proposal. Afterwards, if there are any questions regarding procedure, I will respond to them in terms of BSA procedure. But otherwise, I'm done. Thank you again, and I turn it over to Ms. Miller.
Hello, everyone. I have to tell you, it's very cool to see neighbors that perhaps I walk past on the street. It's nice to be a part of this community. I want to thank you very much for having us again. This is round 2 to talk about this arcade space. And I just want to, I'm going to talk very briefly to just give you moments of history that I am the chair of a committee that was set up to deal with this issue. I, in fact, for many years have been like a dog with a bone on the topic of enhancing this particular space. Years ago, we were talking about doing something, and if you know our buildings, they were built around the 1970s, and many construction projects took precedence over doing anything with this arcade. But in 2020, we were sort of spurred to action because the space was being used by vagrants for both drug use and drug transacting. At that point, the board decided to create this committee, which, by the way, is made up of other board members and residents, including Nancy Sharon, who may be a listener here, who represents us to the Murray Hill Neighborhood Association. So we got together, we created a very comprehensive report about what the issues were with the space. It is Aubrey who will take you through some of the details. My only purpose for speaking is to tell you that the Carlton Regency Board has committed the resources to enhancing the space, to beautifying it, and to making it a place where the community can gather in a way that it should have been all along. So our idea is to make it beautiful. We have a designer. We have had a designer for a while, and make it usable to the general public. So with that, to answer questions, to talk details, I'm going to turn it over to Aubrey. Thank you very much, by the way, for your time, your attention, and your interest in the project.
And good evening, everyone. Aubrey Philibert, and thank you for your time again. And I also want to just take a moment to thank Chairwoman Sandra McKee, as well as the Assistant Director, Brendan Berth, for meeting us on site. I sent an email after our first meeting inviting the community board to meet on site so they can get a better understanding of our intentions with the space. So at the last meeting, I believe that there was a misunderstanding of from some board members, the feeling that the Carleton Regency wanted to put up fencing and gating to sort of privatize the public space. That is certainly not our intention. When we go through the diagram, we'll show you that our true intention is to improve and beautify the space, to make it a more inviting and welcoming space, not only for Carleton Regency residents, but the community as a whole. The pop space, the arcade, it's a cavernous space with dark columns and unfortunately a lot of dangerous and illegal criminal activities occur there at night. During the day, if you're walking by, you'll often see kids, especially when it's raining, you'll see children playing hopscotch, drawing with chalk. I visited the space with one of the Murray Hill Neighborhood Association board members, Michael Ann Rowe, and while we met there was a resident boxing with her personal trainer. In the summer, you'll often see people having yoga classes right in that space. These are the exact activities that we do want to encourage. The Carleton Regency Corp is a co-op. It's a residential co-op comprised of 2 buildings, 210 apartments. They're all residents of Murray Hill. The co-op's intention is to make this a more safe and livable area. The co-op does have a large staff of 14 individuals. Every morning, our reporters go into that space, power wash the space, clean up from the night before. The issue is what happens during the evening. 911, 311, and the local 17 precinct have a well-documented history of the occurrences of the issues that happen there at night. At times, our staff have to clean up human defecation in the morning. The place is rank with urine and sometimes remnants of drug usage. This is not something that we want to encourage in Murray Hill. There are many pop spaces around the city and within Murray Hill. And if you notice, these publicly owned private spaces are closed at night. This is what we're asking for, and a variance to the existing usage, which requires the space to remain open 24/7. At night, we have 1 staff member on duty, who is the front door concierge. The only ability he has is to call the local precinct. And we know how busy they are and how slow they are to respond to calls that aren't seemingly an immediate emergency. We don't have the manpower at night to police that space. Our intention after it is converted to a dawn to dusk use is to beautify it. Beautify it by adding lighting, additional lighting, adding benches so people can actually sit, and tables and chairs so you can enjoy your lunch during the day or have a Zoom meeting in the middle of the day. The concern that was brought up last month is what about the community? Where's the community benefit? Because these pop spaces were built to benefit the community. And I actually met with a gentleman by the name of Kevin O'Keefe and Michael Ann Rowe. Kevin O'Keefe is the chairman of the conservatory. He's the founder of the St. Barton Park Conservatory. And I was really blown away at what Kevin and his group have accomplished at the conservatory. They've really opened that up and made it a community asset. The children for the local schools use that space as an arboretum, sometimes as an education, as a learning forum. Seminars are held there and so on and so forth. And what I was discussing with Kevin is why can't we have those same programs right here at the Carleton Regency Pop Space? He was excited at the notion, and we are well on our way to make that a reality. Kevin, who is also a resident of the Carlton Regency, I asked if he would be willing to join the Carlton Regency Arcade Improvement Project Committee, which formerly was only comprised of Carlton Regency residents. Kevin has accepted the invitation to join the Carlton Regency Arcade Improvement Project Committee. That alone is a testament to the Carlton's commitment to make this a space for the full community to enjoy. Also, Michael Ann Rowe, who she wears many hats, but she is a trustee of the chair of the Green and Clean Committee and the founder of the chair of the Keep Murray Hill Green and Clean. That's a lot of words, but in short, Michael Ann has also accepted the invitation to join the Carlton Regency Arcade Improvement Project Committee. That should be enough to say, to really highlight our commitment to making this a community space for all to enjoy. This is why we want to convert to allow you to pass along the recommendation to the Board of Standards and Appeals, in which we have an application now to convert the space to dawn to dusk access.
And Aubrey, we do have a very long agenda. I was wondering if you might be able to move into the presentation of what your proposal is.
I can do that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So what we proposed last time was we had just shown you a blank space. Brendan, if you're there, if you could bring up the plans, starting with Plan P-2, which was previously submitted to the board. Is Brendan there for screen sharing somewhere? Yes, no?
Yeah, I'm there.
Yes,
I'm there.
he can do that.
Right.
Is this
So
the correct item, by the way?
Start with that. So what you have on the left side is the arcade, which is on East 37th and Lexington. Go to the next page, please.
And Frederick, if I could just point out to some of the members of the committee, I had the opportunity to visit, but I'm not sure that people understand how many buildings are part of this residential complex and how they're linked.
Okay, so if you go back to the previous page, Brendan, I can explain. So what you have is let's take basically three parcels. You have the parcel on the left where the arcade is. That was the original building approved by the Board of Standards and Appeals. The middle parcel is the former Sailor, Seaman, Marine, Air Corps building, which is now vacant as that entity has left the premises. The building to the right is the second building that is owned by the Carlton Regency and is connected to the original building via a connection in the back of the property, the easterly edge of the property. So it basically is a U-shaped complex that goes from 36th Street to East 37th Street that wraps around the former Sailors Seaman Airmen Club.
And you do have a private garden in the rear, and that is a Pops on 36th Street. Is that correct?
I don't believe it is a Pops.
Yeah. Yes. This. So
okay.
And that's one of the unique features of the Carlton Regency. The arcade, which we are referring to today, that's under the jurisdiction of the Board of Standards and Appeals. And what wraps around the south building tower is also a POP space. But that is under the jurisdiction of the Department of City Planning. The application processes for both are very different. We will be coming before you again, probably next year, to apply to also improve the POP space for the south building. It's a completely different application process, but it's important to let the board understand that we do have an overarching plan here. We have also consulted with Keith Powers, the local councilman, and as early as last week, we spoke with him on video conference to explain what the intention is. And I know he seems excited at the way forward. And really what I say the intention is the top space at the south building does not comply with current Department of City Planning rules with regard to signage and seating and so forth, because it was erected prior to those rules being in place. We would like to bring it up to current standard and engage with the community so both of these spaces can be used for community activities.
And maybe, Frederick, before you finish your presentation, our understanding is that at this point, if we support having the space being closed, that there's still opportunity to revise the design. Is that correct?
Absolutely. What we are showing in the next plan, if you will. Brendan, if you can go to page P2, please, the next plan. So can you scale it down so they can see the whole page possibly? Just reduce it. So what we had shown you previously, a little more, keep going. Close. What we had shown you previously was an empty space. What we are proposing now, and this is for illustrative purposes only as it plan shows, because unlike city planning, the BSA, if they approve a plan, if there's any modification to that plan, then the Department of Buildings has the potential to say, oh, you showed 5 tables and now you have 6 tables and you're in violation, or you showed 5 and you have 4, and we don't want to do that. But what we are proposing is to give you an indication, and this will not be finished at the board until for several months, and we also, it can be changed subsequent as well, is a series of fixed seating along the northerly portion against the landscaping. You'll see little rectangles. We're showing a series of tables that are spread out through towards the front and towards the rear of the space. We do have to leave the space on the right open because that is an exit egress for the medical offices as well as for emergency egress. And then if you go to the top of the plan, if you can scroll it down slightly, you'll see we have left, you were good before, go down a little further. Yes, you'll see we talk about an open area, which we have talked about for yoga or for a presentation of some sort, or you could put movable seating in there, hopscotch, anything that leaves some open space and some potential for various community activities. So this is, we think, a vast improvement and responsive to what was presented to us at the last hearing. And yes, we are certainly amenable to any thoughts or revisions that the community board or community members may have on this. So you are correct, Madam Chair.
Could you please scroll down to the next page? I think that's the one where we can see a little more.
Right.
Again, is this, if this is passed by the BSA, is this what will be implemented?
No, this again is, scroll up a little, Brandon. No, other way. I guess scroll down. So go down, now go up a little, just to drop up so I can see that we can see all of the presentation. The top shows the fencing that will be along the East 37th Street facade. This is fencing that will be permanent. It is not movable fencing. It really is above grade.
And excuse me, sorry, Fred, is that the design, the final design of the fencing?
Not,
that's really our concern, I believe.
That is not the final design either. We do not.
Thank you.
It was mentioned that it was prison-like. This was done. No, this is not the final design. There could be curves, there could be ornamentation. It really is illustrative to the extent of where the fencing will be located and the height of the fencing that will be in place at that point in time. Similarly, if you look at the bottom 2 sketches, the right side shows the fencing when the space, the arcade will be closed. And again, this is not necessarily the design. We are told, however, that it should be an open design to prevent graffiti. So we can certainly make it more appealing to the public and to the community board. And when the space is open, or in operation from dawn to dusk, it will look as on the left, with the exception of that one fixed door, which is really emergency egress that will always be available. There will be no visible fencing, so that it will show, as it currently shows, as a basically open space, almost 100% open space. So yes, again, to reiterate, the design is just in terms of size, location, not the ultimate decision.
And as an example, Ms. McKee, when we met, you made, I thought, an excellent suggestion along Lexington Avenue, instead of having the fencing at the property line, to start the fencing one column back. So a portion of the arcade would remain open 24 hours a day. I actually, Connie, who is on this panel, and she's the chairwoman of our committee, also agreed, and we are going to make that change. And I bring up that example because we do want that sort of input, and the board is definitely open to community input. It's for the benefit of the community.
Thank you. And so if I can just clarify, what you're looking for from us this evening is an approval to close or to adopt POP's dusk to dawn hours for the arcade area, with the design to be determined in the future. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. And again, we will keep there is always, until the case is decided at the Board of Standards and Appeals, there is always time to amend it. And if the changes are subsequent, if we should receive an approval, you can always amend thereafter if it's of a minor nature. There is an application called a letter of substantial compliance. So even if it's approved, and then 6 months later, a year later, you say, we really shouldn't have this here or this there, and we want to shift something around, that can be done at a later date. So this approval, you are correct, is just to allow a modification of hours with design features to be determined at a later date.
All right, thank you. So committee members, I see Jim, you have your hand up. You're muted, Jim.
Yeah, I see that. I walked this space a couple of weeks ago, and it's essentially dead space. There's anything, frankly, would be an improvement. It doesn't. It's not inviting at all, and something of this nature, I think, would be appropriate. And certainly, I have no objection to closing it off after dusk, which is what I believe the applicant's working for. So absolutely, I would support this.
Larry.
Okay, on the third slide, which showed the fencing, would you pull out, please? I'm looking for clarification as to what was meant by permanent. It looked like this fencing appearing on 37th Street was all intended, except for a small opening, which was a gate, to be in place, and the only fencing that would disappear during opening hours was for just 3 arches on the Lexington Avenue side, which is the narrow side. Is that a correct interpretation of what we were told?
That is a correct interpretation. Currently, you have planned, first of all, the space is not at grade. So the space is, other than where the staircase is, the space is not physically accessible from the sidewalk. The rectangular planters have been in place for decades. So there is no way to access the space from 37th Street other than via the staircase, correct?
Okay, but from a visual point of view, and especially if you're on the inside, how does having permanent fencing along the long side and almost the entirety of it with a small opening along Lexington Avenue make it less prison-like?
Well, if it is made, I mean, if you're suggesting, and this is a design that is not for me to answer, If you're suggesting that some of this fencing should be operable as well during open hours, that is a consideration. And again, the vertical.
Sure. If your concern is that people can't come up from the street because of the elevation and grade change, and you've got those planters blocking folks, you might want to think about having additional archways fully open to light during the open hours. I'm not saying that you need to open every single one of those arches, but having that one small opening as it exists on the drawing, I think does create and continues to create for what we were criticizing previously.
I think that's a very good suggestion, and Mr. Philibert and Ms. Miller are here to hear that, so we can look into that.
May I just make a very small comment on this? When we walked the space, we also talked about alternatives to fencing. We talked about plexi and we talked about glass. So this is not the final design. So I understand that it's sort of prison-like, but we are very considerate of what this is going to look like in its final version.
Thank you. And I think, Brian, you're up next.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Please bear with me because I'm gonna make a motion for a resolution on this. It's gonna be a little complex and I think it's gonna tie everything up. I think I would move that we resolve to produce a resolution with no objection to the fencing plan as provided, that we recommend to BSA that they make the hours of the space from 7 a.m. daily to 9 p.m. nightly, with the space being able to be closed in between, that we have no objection to the furniture plan as presented tonight, and that if there are any significant changes to this plan, Carlton Regency should revisit CB6 and present the changes for further approval. Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay, we did have 3 other people wishing to make comments. And I might say that we resolve to allow them to close the space from dusk to dawn with a design to be determined. I'm not sure we're comfortable saying we approve of the fencing as presented and the tables and chairs.
I mean, the resolution that I presented has basically says no objection to any of this, which is kind of standard for us. And I think accurately reflects the situation in which there's a lot of vagaries, but I don't think we are looking to micromanage specific placement of furniture within the space. So go ahead.
And let's allow, like we've had a motion and it's been seconded. I guess theoretically we need to vote on it, but we did have 3 other people.
Yeah, we can discuss the motion.
Okay, Victoria.
Yeah.
Victoria, you were next up.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with the hours proposed by the community board. I see big opportunities for programming inside the space, which I don't think tables and seats are providing. So I am wondering if we have as the community board, Sandy, maybe this is what could propose some options for the interior of the space to serve the community, better options.
It sounded like the committee was certainly open to having any recommendations. So I think after this, if we want to put together a list, that would be fine. They can, treat them how they want to.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, we're actually open to that input.
Jim.
Yeah, my comments were on the fencing. If assuming that eastern portion of the plaza is used for space, as it were, is used for other activities, perhaps there might be young children or what have you. And I would think that they would want to keep that fenced off because there is enough of a fall there that a toddler could get hurt falling off the side. With respect to the resolution that's before us, I have no objection to anything stated, except that I think the hours should be dawn to dusk as opposed to 7 to 9 p.m. In the evening hours, as we all know, it gets dark way too early in New York City in the winter months.
Larry.
I like the proposed modification to the resolution that Jim proposed with regard to the hours, because he's quite accurate that it gets dark early in the winter and stays light much later in the summertime, and and why lose the opportunity to get fresh air during that time period. But revisiting again the point I was making about the fences, and I think that what I said previously could be consistent with what Jim was saying, and that is I don't object to all the fencing along the 37th Street side, and if there was a particular purpose to which an area in this arcade might be put, which requires protecting children from falling off a ledge, yeah, absolutely, that would call for permanent fencing. But with regard to other areas which were used for other activities, it might be more attractive to be flexible, as Sandy had proposed after Brian made his motion. So if it's possible at this point to before a vote to tweak the language, I would ask the committee not to vote on this presentation exactly as presented, but conceptually approving it with an encouragement of modifications that keep in mind having the maximum available daylight that isn't permanently fenced off, and second, that the hours be dawn to dusk.
And we're not designing this. I think we need to make that perfectly clear. That's not the goal or the role of
I'm
this.
not suggesting.
I understand, Larry, no, but I just,
Well,
for everyone else on the committee. Letty, you had your hand up, and let's go to you, go back to Brian.
Thank you. I think what the residents are proposing is admirable, but I think it's very speculative. If our resolution deals with the hours and some comments about fencing, fine, and maybe I'm misunderstanding or I'm missing something. But in terms of the design and the programming of the space, everything seems very speculative. So I would defer to your opinion on that, Sandy, as an architect.
And Brian.
So if there's any, even though I presented a resolution, it was seconded. We can have motions to amend any of the specific language in it. And I encourage any member of the committee who feels strongly about it, propose such an amendment. Hopefully not like a bundled amendment, but we can do one thing at a time and do a show of hands. I think we're really close on agreement on the broad strokes of this. I proposed 9 to 7 or 7 to 9, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in part because they are proposing that they're going to install lighting, and we're already cutting this down from a 24/7 allowance public space. So I'm trying to preserve as much utility for the public as possible, and I don't want a public space that gets closed at 3:30 in the afternoon in December and January, because dusk is a very wishy-washy thing.
So should we? I mean, I actually propose that we not approve the fencing and the tables as shown, but that we say that we look forward to seeing a more defined design as the project moves forward. I think 7 to 9 Can we have a show of hands for all those who agree with 7 to 9? Okay, so 7 to 9, and then I guess the rest of the wording is, do we want to say we approve, or I can't remember your exact terminology, Brian.
No
No
objection
objection.
to what was.
Okay. Do we say we have no objection, or that we would like to see the design developed further and will look forward to seeing that?
I was saying that we should do both. We should do no objection now, but we look forward to seeing the design if it is substantially changed.
Okay, and I think my objection is to the fencing as drawn.
information,
But
on information,
Jim,
Chair, on information.
yeah,
I understand the request was simply to change the hours of
hours of
operation.
operation.
And that these other things are ancillary to that. So I don't think we need to address the design or any of that component at this point. If Mr. Becker et al. Want to come back to address it.
So that would be a change to Brian's proposal, so that we would then do a resolution that says we
Well,
approve
I'm
of
just
7 to
saying,
9.
well, no, I'm not proposing that. I'm simply saying that's what my understanding of Mr. Becker and forget the
Okay.
other gentleman's name.
We really
okay.
need to move
Question.
forward here. So, Rich, do
Colbert.
you want to? You haven't spoken yet.
I propose that we amend Brian's speculative resolution to speak only to the issue of opening hours.
Okay, can we have a show of hands
Second.
for all those who agree to that?
A second.
Okay, all right. I think we have a resolution sort of fleshed out then. We are going to have a resolution that supports closing the space from 7 till 9. And
Opening the space.
Yeah.
Opening. the
I'm
space.
sorry, opening the space from 7 to 9. And the design will be developed further as they move through the BSA process. Does anyone second that?
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay, and so let's, I believe we need to have a verbal reply.
Yep, when I call your
Done.
name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. Najat Abdul Samad,
In favor.
Victoria Benatar,
In favor.
Jim Collins,
In favor.
Sandy McKee,
In favor.
Rich Mintz,
In favor.
Larry Shire,
In favor.
Sandro Sherrod,
In favor.
Letty Simon,
In favor.
Susan Steinberg,
In favor.
Gabe Terzo,
In favor.
and Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
In favor.
The resolution
Excellent.
unanimously passes with 11 in favor. We do need someone to write the resolution.
To write the resolution. I see 3 hands up. You can't all write it.
When do you need it? When do you need it? Oh, okay.
A week before full board. So I believe that.
Just curious, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I just want to
Hmm.
confirm with Mr. Becker and Mr. Filbert that this is amenable to what they had requested.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Collins, it is. Thank you.
Okay,
And
very
and
well. Thank you.
I will confirm that the community board will be very much involved and kept abreast of any and all revisions in keeping with your concerns. So thank you for your time this evening, everyone.
Very well.
Jim, are you volunteering to write the resolution?
Depending on when you need it. When do you need it?
Brendan?
The board office needs the resolution in by no later than the Friday before our full board. And June's full board is on June 14th, so June 9th. It's
Yeah,
normal.
all right, yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
can do that.
Okay, thank you very
Send me the
much.
Materials.
Thank
what have
you.
Thank you,
All
everyone.
right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well,
Sure.
Have a good night.
Good evening.
Our next agenda item is a public hearing on the City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality, a proposed citywide zoning text amendment by the New York City Department of City Planning to implement changes to the city's zoning resolution to remove impediments to and expand opportunities for decarbonization projects within all zoning districts and across all 59 of the city's community districts. The public hearing on the City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality based on what I just stated is now open. If any members of the public want to speak on this matter, please raise your hand through Zoom or indicate your written statement or any questions in question answers. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak, but we will do that after the presentation that is going to be made by City Planning. I'll review this at that time. So, Ali, I think if you'd like to move forward.
Sure, let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Ali, and I am the planner and liaison to Community Board 6 from the Department of City Planning. Ozka, who is the team leader for the East Side, is also here. I'm here this evening to talk to you about our text amendment, City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality, which is an opportunity to update our zoning regulations to help all of us meet our city's climate goals. I'm going to give an overview of the text amendment today, but more information and the actual text of the text amendment are available at the ZAP portal for this text amendment, which you can find just by Googling City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality. It should be the first link that shows up. And as Sandy said, after the presentation, there will be time for questions. Sorry yes. to interrupt. You're sharing the screen with your notes. Can you share the other screen? Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. Can everyone see my screen without my notes now? Yeah. Okay. So City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality is the first of 3 text amendments that that the Department of City Planning is developing as part of Mayor Adams's broader City of Yes initiative. The 2 other text amendments for economic opportunity and for housing opportunity are distinct and independent proposals that are not yet finalized. They will begin more public engagement later this summer. The goal of the carbon neutrality proposal is to remove barriers created by zoning that are working against the city's effort to become more sustainable. Before I get into the proposal, I want to take a minute to frame our conversation. Why are we even talking about carbon in the first place? We're currently facing a climate emergency, and it's largely fueled by global carbon dioxide emissions. Carbon dioxide makes up the vast majority of the United States' greenhouse gas emissions, 80% in 2019, and carbon dioxide generally comes from human activity, specifically the combustion of fossil fuels like diesel, gasoline, natural gas, and home heating oil. In 2016, the world community joined together to sign the Paris Agreement, a vision to curtail human greenhouse gas emissions in order to limit overall global warming to 2 degrees Celsius, and thus prevent further environmental damage associated with climate change. Here in New York City, we've been implementing this vision through a number of initiatives under the umbrella of achieving carbon neutrality by reducing the city's emissions 80% by 2050, or 80 by 50 for short. So what do we mean by a carbon neutral city? It's a city where we're focusing on reducing our operational carbon emissions in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. It's a city where we've reduced our overall energy needs, and to do this, we'll need to retrofit almost every building in the city to become highly efficient and reduce wasted energy. It's a city where we've cleaned the grid, moving from fossil fuel powered electricity to renewables like solar and wind. It's a city where we've electrified all remaining energy needs, including our vehicles and our buildings. This means moving away from fossil fuel fired furnaces and boilers to newer electrically powered technologies for heating and cooling, namely heat pumps. As you can see in the chart on the right, the key driver of our city's carbon emissions is by far our building sector, and there's a big relationship between our buildings and the zoning laws that govern them. So our research for this text amendment builds on a strong foundation. 10 years ago, in 2012, the department issued Zone Green, the first comprehensive overhaul of our zoning to support emerging green technologies like rooftop solar and wind. In some ways, you can think of our research for carbon neutrality as a follow-up to Zone Green, a chance to revisit, update, and adjust it in light of the many technological and legal changes since. These changes include, since 2016, the focus on decarbonization coming from the Paris Agreement and 80 by 50. We've also included feedback from architects, engineers, advocates about issues they've identified and ideas for improvement, as exemplified in the Zone Greener report from the Urban Green Council, which we have consulted. And lastly, this also includes updating the zoning to reflect the Climate Mobilization Act at the city level, especially Local Law 97, which imposes large fines on buildings that don't reduce their carbon emissions, as well as the CLCPA at the state level, which in particular sets ambitious solar and energy storage goals for the city. So development of this proposal began in March when Mayor Adams announced his vision for a city of yes. Since then, we've conducted extensive outreach, in particular with practitioners and other subject matter experts. We've worked hard to share our research with the public during this process, holding 4 open to the public info sessions, 2 in October of last year and 2 in March of this year. Also in March, we partnered with the Urban Green Council, a recognized leader in climate work in New York City, to convene a group of technical and policy experts to review an initial draft of the proposal and validate the climate goals we're trying to support, as well as the solutions we're putting forward. So along the way, we've been asking experts, nonprofit leaders, and advocates, what do you need to do to help achieve our collective climate goals? How has zoning helped or hurt? And through this engagement over the last year, we've identified a number of ways that zoning can help support this effort. Our proposal is broken down into 4 key goals and 17 specific zoning changes, which I'll walk through with you now one by one. I'll come back to this slide at the end so that you can see all the proposals together. I'm going to go over all the proposals, but go into a bit more depth onto some of them. But if there's one that I don't focus on that you want more information about, it's both on the webpage that I mentioned, and also I'm happy to address it in the Q&A. So the first key goal is supporting the decarbonization of our city's energy grid. This slide shows city and state initiatives that are already underway. These are not part of our zoning proposal. They're the context in which our planning work is situated. So by 2040, New York State is legally required to achieve a 100% renewably based energy grid. To support this, we will be developing large amounts of offshore wind and bringing in more clean hydroelectric power from upstate and Canada. In 2016, we set a goal of getting to 1,000 megawatts of rooftop solar across the city by 2030. We're currently at around 300 to 400 megawatts. So we have 7 years to more than double the amount of solar in New York City. To utilize the energy from offshore wind and from rooftop solar, our energy grid will have to become smarter and more decentralized, with resources spread throughout the city. And in order to support this new grid, we'll need to rely on energy storage. So to support the ongoing work of cleaning the grid, we have 5 zoning proposals. I'll go into a bit more detail on the first one. So first, we're taking a look at our rooftop zoning allowances to ensure that there aren't any limitations holding us back from our solar goals. Currently, zoning allows solar panels to be added to roofs above the height limit up to 6 feet in R1 through R5 districts and up to 15 feet in residential districts greater than R6, as well as in all commercial and manufacturing districts. It allows a maximum of 25% roof coverage and requires a 6-foot setback from the edge of the building. These restrictions make solar infeasible in many locations and also sometimes conflict with FDNY's need for 9 feet of headroom above the building for the fire department to walk under. So our proposal changes these restrictions and allows solar to cover the entire roof, which you can see in the illustration. It also allows a 15-foot maximum height in any district, simplifying the regulations. However, for historic districts and for landmark buildings, LPC review will still be required. So any solar canopies installed will need to be reviewed and approved by LPC, who will deem whether or not they're appropriate. Our second zoning proposal is for solar panels in our city's 8,000 plus acres of open parking areas, ensuring that zoning is updated to always allow solar canopies above parking lots. The third proposal facilitates community solar, a scheme that allows, for example, your solar array to provide power for your neighbors. Today's zoning classifies community solar as a commercial use. However, there are large residential campuses, hospitals, schools, and colleges in residential districts where community solar would be a great fit, and our zoning needs to be updated to allow for it. Fourth, we need to ensure that safe FDNY and DOB reviewed energy storage facilities are located where they're needed most. Energy storage is currently not allowed as of right in residential districts where the public needs access to clean and renewable energy for their homes. It's currently allowed as of right in commercial and manufacturing districts, but requires a BSA permit in residential districts. This proposal would allow energy storage systems under 10,000 square feet as of right in residential districts and maintain the BSA requirement for larger facilities. Finally, onshore wind faces strict limits in today's zoning without a relief valve for sites where greater heights may be appropriate. This zoning proposal creates a new tool that can be used by future applicants to submit taller onshore wind facilities for a public review process with the City Planning Commission. To be clear, this proposal does not change the current height restrictions on wind turbines. It just creates an authorization that can be applied for in the case that greater heights are appropriate. Our next goal focuses on our city's million-plus existing buildings. These buildings are by far our biggest sources of carbon dioxide emissions, and to improve, we'll need to retrofit virtually every single building to retire oil and gas-powered furnaces and boilers and replace them with new, highly efficient electric systems, as well as improve the efficiency of exterior walls, windows, and roofs to keep the heat and cool inside. It's important to note 2 laws adopted by the City Council in 2019 and 2021 that are crucial here. Local Law 97 will impose fines on large buildings if they do not cut their carbon emissions starting in 2024. And Local Law 154 requires that all newly constructed buildings are electrified from the get-go. Fossil fuel-based equipment will no longer be allowed in new construction. Within this context, zoning can help support building decarbonization in 3 ways. First, zoning can accommodate the increasing need for outdoor equipment such as heat pumps, which cannot be located in the building's basements or cellars by allowing it to be located above the zoning height limit on rooftops. Unlike traditional mechanical equipment, which often can be located in a basement or cellar, electric systems often need outdoor locations for ventilation purposes. This proposal allows greater flexibility for this type of equipment by expanding the allowances for rooftop mechanical equipment and energy infrastructure equipment. The proposal would allow 50% rooftop coverage up to a height of 15 feet. So you can see that within the brown fence, that's the 50% area up to 15 feet. But then within that 50%, 30% of the area could rise above 15 feet. You can see this in the white box to different heights depending on the district. So depending on what district you're in, it could rise to a height between 25 feet and 55 feet. This allows for larger equipment to be permitted as densities increase. This proposal also includes requirements for screening, both when the equipment is a permitted obstruction lying above the height limit and when it's below the height limit. Currently, the zoning resolution doesn't include any screening requirements for when equipment is below the height limit. So we're expanding our screening requirements to address this and protect the visual quality of our streetscapes. By eliminating zoning barriers for necessary equipment, this proposal number 6 will give homeowners, architects, and engineers greater flexibility to navigate their best path to electrification. I'll now go over the other 2 proposals about building decarbonization. The next one is for building exterior retrofits. Zoning needs to ensure that when someone is trying to add thicker insulation, or even in some cases for larger buildings, reclad the building by removing an old facade and replacing it with a new efficient one, that they don't run into zoning obstacles that prevent them from undertaking the project. Next, we need to update an existing incentive, the 2012 Zone Green wall thickness deduction, which awards a small amount of additional floor area for better than code buildings. And we're now updating this to reflect the latest energy code and best practices for the future. Finally, I want to talk about cost. Undertaking this retrofitting work is not going to be free, but there are billions of dollars available at the federal, state, and city level to support it. The NYC Accelerator is a program through the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. This is outside of our text amendment and outside of the Department of City Planning, but it's a resource that can help connect you with technical and financial support. There are a number of programs to subsidize retrofits and electrification through Con Edison and NYSERDA, the state energy agency. The state also offers tax incentives for solar installation, and these existing programs will be significantly augmented by funding through the Inflation Reduction Act, which will be available soon. The next goal is to support the decarbonization of our vehicles. There are currently 2 million private vehicles registered in New York City, and less than 1% are zero emission. To help owners make the switch to electric, federal and state initiatives are underway. By 2035, New York State and Albany has indicated that all new vehicles sold in the state will need to be zero emission. But one key issue that zoning does touch on is where you can park and charge your electric vehicle. Addressing this will be key to helping New Yorkers make the switch. Finally, we also recognize that the future isn't simply focused on vehicles. The more trips that can be taken by bike, scooter, or on foot, or by transit, the better for the health of our environment and our city. Within this context, zoning can help support this goal with 5 key changes. First, allowing commercial charging facilities in all commercial and manufacturing districts. They're currently prohibited in about half of the city's commercial districts. Second, allow building owners to designate a portion of their existing parking spaces to be offered up as public EV charger sharing spaces. The same rules that currently apply for car sharing vehicles in existing parking garages or lots. Third, allow for more flexible use of public parking lots, public parking garages, and commercial accessory parking facilities by allowing car rental, car sharing, commercial vehicle storage, and public EV charging within these facilities too. Fourth, expand special rules that currently only apply in Manhattan that allow for indoor automated parking facilities to be available to everyone citywide. Fifth, update our parking rules to acknowledge the need for public bicycle parking and allow bike parking facilities in all commercial districts. Finally, our last goal relates to reducing the city's stormwater and solid waste and helping eliminate the carbon emissions associated with both of those waste streams. First, we can reduce stormwater runoff by promoting greater permeability on site. This means less water flowing into energy-intensive treatment plants. Second, we can reduce the energy associated with hauling and processing our garbage by reducing the amount. Up to 45% of our waste stream is organic material that doesn't need to go to a landfill and can be reused within the city through composting. Third, we can reduce the carbon emissions associated with our food by promoting more local food production on the city's rooftops. Here are the 4 zoning proposals for this goal. First, clarify zoning's paving rules to ensure that permeable paving, which allows water to infiltrate the soil right where it falls, is always allowed. Second, update our zoning's street tree requirements to allow for new high-performance street bed types such as connected tree beds, and rain gardens. Third, our zoning resolution currently doesn't even mention the words compost or recycling. It's time to add specific rules clarifying where these uses are allowed to help these sectors grow. Finally, rooftop greenhouses are allowed on non-residential buildings currently, but to build one, you need to obtain a certification from the chair of the City Planning Commission. By streamlining this requirement, we will allow them as of right and allow DOB to review applications for building permits, cutting costs and simplifying the process for those looking to grow food on their community's rooftops. That concludes the overview of the 17 specific zoning changes we've identified to help support the larger project of decarbonizing our city. I'm going to briefly discuss the timeline, and then we can go back to this slide to go into the Q&A. As a citywide zoning text amendment, this process will continue for the next several months. All 59 community boards will be concurrently reviewing this proposal with their borough boards and borough presidents. In July, the City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on the proposed changes. And in August, taking into account all that they've heard during the review process, the commission will vote on approving or modifying the proposal and will then pass it on to the City Council, where the City Council will have 50 days to ultimately adopt the zoning changes and make them law. All right, thank you so much for listening. I'll go back to the summary page so you can see all the proposals together, and Ozka and I will answer any questions to the best of our ability. And if there's any we can't answer right now, I'll write them down and get answers to you as soon as possible.
Great, thank you. Susan, you had a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Sandy. With respect to the financial support that will be available for building retrofits, does it matter whether the property owner is a big one or a small one?
I think that a good resource is the accelerator that I mentioned, and you can contact them regardless of the size of your property, and they're able to connect you to the right resources for your situation.
Thank you.
I think Gabe, you're next.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is all great. I'm just curious if giving landmarks veto power over any of this is necessary, or, if there's some flexibility on that in the future.
Sorry, one sec. I'm having trouble with my screen share. Okay. Can you see the proposal still?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of letting landmarks have veto power, that's currently what the process is, because they have jurisdiction over landmark buildings. They will be able to determine what is appropriate or not. So that's not something that we have control over at the Department of City Planning. That will be in LPC's territory. Yeah.
I also wanted to note that if any members of the public want to speak on this matter, please raise your hand through Zoom or indicate your written statement or any questions in the Q&A. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Remember that before you begin speaking, please state your full name and your affiliation. And I believe we do have some questions that have come up, but we'll continue with our members currently. Jim?
Somebody said a long time ago, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I support the general notions behind all of this. I think it's too rapid. I think it's too expensive. Even if there is funding to support these transformations, particularly the retrofit, there's an opportunity cost of doing that. It also troubles me that New York City seems to think that we need to be the first on all of this stuff. The first in the nation, for example, to ban gas stoves in new construction. I saw one iteration of the climate plan for New York State that said that we were going to use renewable natural gas, but then the governor signed a law saying that we're not going to have natural gas hookups of any type in new residential construction or new construction period. I don't think this is well thought. I know that in China, for example, when they talk about electric vehicles, they talk about a pod system where cars go in and have their batteries switched out, and that seems to be the principal means that they're looking at for rechargeable batteries. I have friends that were served in Vietnam that say, you never want to take the point because that's the guy that gets shot, and that the enemy is there. We're taking the point. We're trying to be the pioneers in all this, and we're risking making huge and costly mistakes, and we're burdening businesses and residents. How much more can residents take of additional expenses that don't exist in any other part of this country? That's all.
Jim, I'd just like to remind you, this is zoning. And Ali, if you want to respond to that, do you have any response or?
Sure. I mean, I appreciate your comment. And the purpose of at least our zoning proposals are to try to make some of these changes easier within the zoning regulations. The laws are already passed, and so now our zoning proposals are trying to allow that to happen more smoothly and not to be blocked by zoning.
Okay, thank you. Majed and then Larry, and then we do have some comments from the public.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Ali, for the presentation. One question I have about the rooftop solar. This was something we flagged earlier. I wonder what's the thinking about any required light and shade studies and basically the shadow that will be casted, especially for over R5. Most of our district is R7 and up. That's 15 feet. So that's a lot of shadow.
Sure. So as part of this proposal, there was an EAS, which did a shadow study, and you can read it also on our website. It's like within the EAS, there's a section on shadows, and they did a shadow study and found that there wasn't going to be significant adverse shadow impacts because the additional height in their study, it didn't end up being a large shadow. It was it was a small shadow that only showed up at some times in a small area.
And I'd also add that the existing requirements around this is for 15 feet already, especially in CB6. This is just allowing for coverage to be increased for the most part. Currently, coverage is allowed about 25%, I believe, and it's just we're allowing 100% coverage, which can seem aggressive, and it is aggressive. But again, it's in response to a very aggressive climate emergency. And we need to put our rooftops to work to be able to generate renewable energy.
Larry. Larry? You're muted, Larry. Larry, we'll come back to you when you
I'm fine.
Okay.
I just solved the problem. I have
Great.
I have two issues that I'd like to touch upon. One is an extension of what Majed just brought up with regard to the shadow effect. Now, with regard to a specific building, not in terms of the overall effect, if one makes a big investment on a rooftop array, and then their neighbor casts a shadow on them, that's certainly something that is a pretty significant risk factor here, unless the zoning proposal is tweaked to address this concern. second matter relates to maybe a more technical concern that we've brought up in earlier committee meetings relating to whether the electricity that is generated from the rooftops is going to be stored in the building, both to provide light and other electrical uses during the dark in that particular building, and also as an emergency backup provision, particularly if we're not allowing new natural gas installations for generators.
I think to answer your first question, I just want to clarify that the zoning proposal isn't mandating rooftop solar on rooftops, it's just allowing it. So
I'm aware.
Okay.
I'm aware that the issue is there a protection for someone who has built a rooftop array and that would grandfather their right to the sun and prevent a neighboring building from growing in size so as to cast a shadow and render that facility useless.
Oscar, do you have any thoughts on this?
No. There is no protection, right?
Yeah, so there aren't any sort of built-in protections as exist for something like that, but we, are looking for your comments and concerns, so we would encourage you to include that in your comments to the commission.
Right. Well, if you lived out in the woods, you might be able to take down a tree that grows up and casts a shadow, trim it back so that the sun keeps coming through. But I don't know how you do that to a neighboring property that you do not own and control. But the city zoning resolution might be able to offer protections. It was written in such a way.
We do have. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say we'll definitely take your comment. Absolutely.
Okay, and then the other issue related to, as I said, technically, can there be some detail that relates to either encouraging people to have battery backup arrays, or at least address the issue as a matter of dealing with emergencies in the absence of new natural gas hookups.
Well, part of our proposal.
In other words, so talking about going offline, having an inverter so that the electricity isn't sold back to Con Edison as is presently done at Stuyvesant Town, which has no battery storage facility on site.
It's not part of the zoning proposal to mandate that any building has some specific energy storage facility, but it is part of the zoning proposal to allow for these large energy storage systems to be allowed, so that would be possible if a building chose to have an energy storage, like a battery type facility.
So the suggestion is that it might be preferred, as in what you're offering as an incentive.
Yes, thank you, and we'll put that in the comments as well.
And we have some questions from our questions. I might quickly read through them. Ann Seligman has asked if we can put contact information so members of the public can also submit their questions and concerns. If you could put that into the chat, that would, I think everyone has that available. And my understanding is you are still accepting comments and concerns, and that they will be addressed and looked at.
Yes.
Okay. And this presentation you'll give it to CB6 and we can post it on our website. It's very informative and helpful.
Yes, I can give you this presentation, but I also can give you, there's a presentation that's available on the ZAP portal that is this presentation plus more detailed slides on each of the 17 proposals, because I wasn't able to go into the detail
Yeah.
for each of the 17, but I can give you the longer version.
Right, and you might want to expand on that acronym when you put it in the chat. Just not everybody's familiar with it. And then I guess one of the questions was about using new solar technologies, but again, as this is zoning, I'm not sure how that relates. There's no restriction on the technologies that people choose to use, is there?
No, there is not.
Okay. And what does FDNY say about, they've approved the solar to the edge of the building right now. I think that they have the setback for fireman access.
Yes, they have, we've worked in conjunction with FDNY as part of this proposal, and their restriction is really about the headroom above the building. They need 9 feet of headroom above the building. And so currently some districts have only 6 feet of height for the solar panels, and that's an issue for them because they can't walk under it and they can't walk above the solar panels. So the 15 feet is better for them.
And another question from Ann Selgeman is electric does not mean renewable. And there seems to be an interchange in terminology. We know electric isn't renewable currently.
Sure, electric is not renewable. That's correct. They're 2 different things. But in order to facilitate this energy transition, we need to both move to electricity and to renewables, and that will have to happen concurrently. And so we have to be developing this grid that can handle electricity while we're also shifting the source of that electricity.
And here's a gentleman that suggests that we free up our roofs for rooftop bars and rooftop pools. I'm not sure the raised solar restricts that. I know some of the solar companies actually advocate that this is a way to use your rooftop more.
Yeah, you could use your rooftop as a canopy under and have shade. I don't know, but it's not restricting other uses for rooftops. It's just allowing an additional use.
And this particular gentleman also advocates more subways rather than buses, which of course carry more people, etc. And higher densities as well. Here's another question from Scott Baker. There's an electric transformer shortage, and other retractable transmission equipment has a shortage too. This is what is the city doing about increasing this? I think it's addressing the problem, but again, that's not a zoning issue, as I understand.
I don't know, Asuka, do you know anything about this?
No, Sandy's right, and that's not a zoning issue, but we are allowing for different sorts of energy.
And Giannis, and I'm not going to attempt the last name, my apologies. Thank you for your presentation. Is there a study of what's going to be the effect on rents and property values with the decarbonization projects?
So we are not doing a study on rents and property values. That's not really something that is part of this proposal. This proposal, again, is mostly associated with removing any zoning barriers that currently exist to prevent property owners from complying with the local law 97.
Okay. Again, from Ann Selgeman, the timing is such that we will not be here over the summer, but I think we are looking for a response from the community board this evening. That's one of the things that we have several categories. And for the committee, we can have no objection, favorable, conditional favorable, unfavorable, conditional unfavorable, or waive comment. But we have discussed this several times at committee level. I think some of our new members may not have heard the presentations, but we have had our planning consultant also give us some information. Here's another question about cost. A big part of the cost will be wages of the working force. They will be executing the plans. How are we going to make sure the wages are going to livable wages, and also the landlords will not hike up the rents to capture the flow of your decarbonization dollars?
An important concern, and thank you for your comment. Again, not something that zoning can address, but we encourage everyone to advocate for these things and talk to your local electeds as these things are being, flushed out in the community and the council.
From Scott Baker, most microcars are disallowed due to the auto lobby and their alleged safety regulations. Will the city or state support overriding such car restrictions? And will perpendicular parking be used to encourage two-person car use? Is there in the zoning, is there an analysis of parking size?
So we don't have an analysis on parking side. It's more about parking spaces. So not changing any regulations that currently exist around parking.
Okay, so is it DOB that controls parking size, parking space size?
I believe that's a standard size from, because they need to be able to fit any sort of car. So they're standard size by DOB and things. I'm not really sure what those are, but yeah, not controlled by us.
Okay, it should be. Will the solar panels be regulated to be safe in hurricane force winds from being blown off roofs? Again, that's a DOB issue, it's my understanding. What is EAS? And I believe it's an EIS, if you might just give a brief description.
Sorry, it is an EAS. It's an environmental assessment. What's the S? I was gonna
Environmental assessment statement.
Okay,
So,
got it.
EAS is required by law to consider all potential benefits and impacts of the proposal. That's New York City and New York City and state law. An EAS is an environmental study that considers 19 different technical areas to determine whether a land use action might have significant adverse environmental impacts. If they do have adverse environmental impacts, that triggers an EIS, which is an environmental impact statement. The analysis for this proposal determined that it was an EAS as it did not have any significant impacts on those 19 different areas that are considered.
Okay. Will battery backups meet stringent fire department inspections to prevent the sorts of explosions, fires we've seen lately with e-bikes?
Yes, if you're talking about the energy storage systems, the battery energy storage, these will they will definitely be approved by DOB and FDNY. They're really different types of batteries than the types of batteries that we've seen in these e-bike explosions. These are really much more safe, they're much larger, and they meet some of the most stringent inspections and certifications in the nation. Whereas the e-bike batteries are often not certified at all, require regular charging, often on improper outlets, and deal with the wear and tear of regular transportation. And these will be approved, as I said, both by the fire department and DOB, who have stringent standards and regulations for battery storage.
And Yanis had an additional question. I believe you answered part of it just a moment ago, but I'm wondering what fraction of a building's energy footprint would solar panels save? And of course, that varies highly, right, depending on orientation and other aspects.
Yeah, I don't think that we can say all across the city what the solar panels would generate. It will depend on the building, where it is, and the size. It's hard to say.
And this is Christina Brown, who's very excited about the proposal and believes the solar PV will also allow for more accessible and enjoyable rooftops. But does the proposal also allow for growing green jobs?
The proposal allows for all the different things that I mentioned, and to install those, there may be jobs, but that's not part of the zoning proposal itself.
Pam Bash, has there been any thought given to incentivize clean temporary storage of composting materials by allowing such rooms to be removed from FAR calculations similar to a mechanical space?
I don't think that that has been considered, but I can definitely take down that comment and refer it. Yeah.
Could solar windows provide an alternative to rooftop solar panels that would circumvent the need for zoning modifications and building code amendments? It's an alternate, right? Windows certainly are acceptable.
Yes, this proposal doesn't disallow window technologies. It's just allowing for the rooftop solar.
We're getting more questions here. When you do the carbon emissions calculus for your proposed decarbonization technologies, have you accounted for the carbon emissions and the environmental impact of the massive extraction of materials, mostly are rare earth elements that will be required to implement your projects? If the carbon accounting is done properly, would your proposals be truly green or more on the brown, if not the gray side?
Oscar, do you have a thought?
Yeah, so again, this is something that, this proposal is really meeting what is the standard and out there, and all the different green technology advocates and all the different climate resiliency advocates, and again to meet the local law that has already passed. We need to be making an effort to going towards zero carbon. We understand that throughout the supply chain of these things, there might not be carbon neutrality throughout, but like at the end of the day, we're in a space with the climate emergency being what it is, that we need to be allowing for and really incentivizing to a degree the electrification and to be moving away from carbon sourced energy that is powering our city. And again, this is related mostly to that goal. And there are concerns, and your concerns are valid, but this is not the space for that, like in the sense that this proposal is not an answer to that. This proposal is really an answer to decarbonization of our building stock, decarbonization of our vehicles, and all the different things that are related to the requirements that are coming down the pike from the state and from the city regarding decarbonization.
And we have two final questions or comments. I really appreciate these proposed changes in zoning and this attention to detail, all of it in the context of what the Secretary General of the UN called a code red for humanity, Duncan Wright. And this is saying, will this increase rents? I'm not sure there's an answer to that one.
So again, not something that's related to density. This is just to we're hoping to offset costs that would be related to the local law. So the local law is a requirement across the city for everyone, regardless of whether these changes exist or not. Building owners have to comply with the local law requirements for energy for their buildings. And we're hoping that by removing any barriers and making these changes to be allowed as of right, where they don't have to come get any further approvals, that can just go DOB to create these alternatives for their buildings as it makes sense for their buildings, allowing for rooftop solar, allowing for mechanical equipment to be in the electrified version of the mechanical equipment to be built as of right. All of these things will remove barrier, remove cost, remove process time, and hopefully allow for this to be done in a more seamless way.
Great, thank you. The public hearing on the City of Yes for carbon neutrality is now closed. And I think we as a board need to have a motion on this. We have, as I mentioned, the following categories: no objection, favorable, conditional favorable, unfavorable, conditional unfavorable, or waive comments. Jim, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, I had a hand raised during the hearing. If there were any plans to measure the the cost impact of all this, and to see if there's any plans with respect to go ahead.
I believe
Those were
that's-
questions for the hearing, and I have no intention of support.
Majed,
Making a motion to vote in favor of the proposed changes.
do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay,
So just to be clear, it's favorable.
favorable, yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Me too,
Uh,
favorable, sorry.
Okay, and we've
Excuse
had
me,
a
I'm
second.
sorry. Who seconded it? Who
I
seconded
believe,
it?
Gabe did.
Thank you.
and if we can now go ahead and vote on that motion to have a favorable response to the City of Yes proposals as listed in the zoning text amendment.
Okay, when I call your name, please say whether you're in favor, oppose, abstain, or abstain for cause. Majed Abdul Samad,
In favor.
Victoria Benitar,
In favor.
Jim Collins,
Opposed.
Sandy McKee,
In favor,
Rich Mintz,
In favor.
Larry Shire,
In favor.
Sandro Sherrod,
In favor.
Letty Simon, Letty,
Letty, are you, oh, you're muted, sorry.
In favor,
okay,
sorry,
no worries. Susan Steinberg,
In favor.
Gabe Terzo,
In favor.
and Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
In favor.
With 10 in favor, 1 opposed, nobody abstained or abstaining for cause, the resolution passes. We do need someone to write this resolution, though. I see Majed's hand is raised.
I can take it.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay, our next agenda item is an update on the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. Desiree, are you doing the presentation? Sorry, it's so late.
That's fine. Sorry, my lighting isn't very good. I'm not sure why, but the presentation is more important anyway. Thank you all for having us tonight. Let me share my screen. We have a quick update, so shouldn't be too long. Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so hello, everyone. My name is Desiree Gazzo with the Eastside Coastal Resiliency Project. Thank you again, CB6, for squeezing us in tonight. Again, we have just a short presentation on Project Area 2. I'm here with colleagues from maybe, but not sure if who's still on, but colleagues from DDC and our project team to present a quick update on the Eastside Coastal Resiliency Project Area 2. I think the last time we were here was in February. So Project Area 2 is moving right along. We have just a quick overview of contracts. Project Area 1, again, everything is pretty much the same. The only new activity we started there really is the East Houston Street retaining wall at East Houston Street and East River Park. So if any of you do use that entrance to the park, you'll see the retaining wall demolition there. For Project Area 2, we have 2 new gates installed, so we'll have some photos of that coming up here in the presentation. We have over 1,600 feet of flood wall installed. And for parallel conveyance, again, most of that work is happening in the southern portion of the parallel conveyance project down closer to Montgomery Street. So we'll save speaking to that for another evening. And tonight we're really just going to focus on Project Area 2 and a quick update. Here's the schedule that we've been showing. As many of you are aware, the northern part of Stuyvesant Cove Park has been closed a bit longer than we anticipated to finish up some of the landscape railings there. But again, we have some news on that coming up in the next couple of slides. The construction progress for the gate work. So again, these are the gates that are being installed from the Murphy Brothers Playground North. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 roller gates and then 5 swing gates. So to date, 13, the gates that have the black text, those are the ones that have been installed. So 13, 14, 17, and 18 have been installed. And then 9 through 12, 15 and 16 will be installed throughout this year. So these are a few photos of gates 13 and 17, which were installed on April 28th. One, gate 13, was installed during the day, and then gate 17, because it crosses the FDR service road, was installed overnight because they had to do lane closures there. So again, gate 13, I'll just pop back here. Gate 13 is at East 20th Street, and then gate 17 is here at the FDR Drive service road. So those went really well. And then as we've mentioned, Astor Levy Playground is open. The flood wall, curb, and sidewalk construction is still ongoing at this East 23rd Street intersection. Stuyvesant Cove Park north of East 20th Street is scheduled to reopen on Friday. So we're very excited about that. So some good news. So we are very excited that the portion north of East 20th Street again is scheduled to reopen on Friday, May 26th. And then we have the southern portion here. So north of the ferry terminal to 20th Street, so just a bit more there, is also scheduled to reopen May 26th. So that part will open. This southern portion here has not been planted yet, and it can't be planted until the fall, now that we're in kind of the warmer weather. But they still, DDC still did decide to open that. Still did decide to open that now with the northern portion of the park, and the beds will just be mulched. And then our team will need to come in and finish up the landscape railing in that area. But we're already using that area to access the ferry terminal right now. So it really is, they did make the decision to just open that area. So right now, there will not be access at East 18th Street. The access will still only be at East 20th Street, but they are working on, again, providing access at East 18th Street, and then access between Stuyvesant Cove Park and East River Park again. So that should be, again, opening up fairly soon, again, within the next month or so. That's what we're anticipating there. So again, this photo is the photo of kind of that little sliver of the esplanade that folks have been using to access the ferry terminal. But as you can see, this area of Stuyvesant Cove Park, and we'll look in the next couple of slides, is substantially complete besides the planting. There is some work ongoing still, on the FDR service road, on ramp, and then within the Con Ed facility as well, to move that southern portion of the work forward. So again, just this update on the construction progress. This is a rendering, that northern area 1, and then area 2, the part north of the ferry terminal, again, will be opening Friday, May 26th. And then the Greenway connecting to East River Park is scheduled for June. These are a few photos. The one on the left is the Greenway curb installation and the granite blocks south of East 20th Street. So they are making progress with the Greenway as well. And then the photo to the right is the new gate there. You'll see it in kind of that like enclosure because it's a slide gate. So it needs to be kind of docked in an area and then it slides shut. And then you'll see kind of where the last plantings were before they, the rest of the plantings will come in the fall. And then this is a few other of the construction photos. This is again the formwork south of East 20th Street at what will be gate 12. And then this is the formwork underneath the FGR Drive at where will be placed gates 10 and 11. For what we heard, Sandra, I finally got the response to that question. My apologies for it taking a minute. But the pedestrian plaza at the FDR and 20th, and if this isn't what the question was about, then we could certainly talk through that. But that will be constructed under the parallel conveyance contract. This is the 20th Street Entry Plaza final review rendering that was in the PDC presentation. I included the link here. So that was one of the questions that we had. The other question that we had from the last meeting, I think, was about the electric hookups in Stuyvesant Cove Park. From what we've heard, there are not electric hookups in Stuyvesant Cove Park. Hold on one second. Okay. I am going to do a little bit more digging. That's what our construction team had come back with, but I'll do a little bit more digging as to potentially why there may not have, or if there was some background on that. So I did want to provide a response, but I'm going to go back and just do a little bit more digging on that. And then the last item was about the Murphy Brothers Little League coordination. There was a mention that on the website, it mentioned that the Little League was still coordinating locations for the practices and games. I did check in with Parks and they said that the Peter Stuyvesant Little League was given extra time at 2 other locations, Peters Field and Robert Moses Playground, to mitigate time lost at Murphy Brothers. So if there are any further questions, you might just want to reach out to the Little League Association. Maybe they just didn't update their webpage, because I saw, because I looked too while I was preparing this, and it still does say that. And then if there is further coordination needed, we could certainly reach out to Parks more if there's, again, more information that the Little League can't provide. And that was the last slide that we had. So, again, just a quick update. We wanted to share the good news. So that way, the CB6 was aware that the sections of the park will open, and we have been coordinating with EDC and Solar One on that opening as well.
Thank you, Desiree. And Larry, you have a question.
Yes. Now that the access at 18th Street is fully closed off, this presents an opportunity to improve the safety of the access there, crossing that complicated intersection, providing for a more direct route, which is what a lot of Stuyvesant Town residents avail themselves of, going against traffic, running in front of the traffic that's turning from the northbound exit 7 ramp into Avenue C. And this was brought up by myself during the environmental impact statement comments. It seems like a perfect time, if this was ever in the cards, for it to finally be installed. What say you about whether this improvement will ever happen?
Sorry. So Larry, I think I can go back and look at what the the final PDC. I pulled up the rendering for 20th Street. I didn't pull up the rendering for
18th Street.
East 18th Street, right? So I can go back and look at that, but what is in this contract is what is going to be built, you know, right now. Again, Sandy had asked about East 20th Street, and I know that's being built under the parallel conveyance contract.
Right, and
but I
there's
could still, yeah.
there's a separate parallel conveyance right there at 18th Street and Avenue C. You can see that.
Yeah, so I can see what that, you know, I could come back, or I could send a link to CB6 about what that intersection there looks like. But as far as I know, the Greenway will still, you know, connect into the park there at East 18th Street, similar to the way it does. I know we were improving the access area and the plaza areas and the openings to the park. But I don't know, again, off the top of my head, what exactly the interchange between Avenue and C and East 18th Street, if that, you know, changes in any way. So I could certainly come back with that the next time we present, or again, bring, you know, send Sandy and CB6 an updated link so they could pass that along. Where, you know, where exactly we could find, you know, that entrance.
Right,
Yeah.
because previously the timing on the crosswalks was such that it forced, or at least in the minds of many of the pedestrians, caused them to go against the signal and put themselves in danger, because it really is a roundabout and a long path and waiting periods that you have to endure in order to do that. And then the last part of it is fixing the signage that DOT had erroneously installed or failed to install in and around that intersection, that more clearly sends you on the shortest route to the ferry terminal. As it is right now, there's a permanent sign that directs you up to 20th Street, which, like a broken clock, it is correct right now. But afterwards, it maybe move that sign to tell you to cross Avenue C instead of to go up to 20th Street to get to the ferry.
Great. Do we have, and thank you, Larry. Do we have other questions from anyone on the committee? Okay. Just one question here. Nathan has some questions, but I recommend that he look at the website because there's a ton of information there, and I think it will answer all his questions for him. And then Scott Baker asked, when will 1820 Greenway Esplanade be reopened?
Yeah, from what we're anticipating, it's in June. So as soon as they finish up the gate work there, it should be that area that should be able to reopen again.
And Giannis asked if a pedestrian overpass is being considered at East 18th or 20th Street.
A pedestrian,
But it's similar to 25th Street.
Oh, a pedestrian overpass.
Overpass.
I don't believe so. Not as part of the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. I know DDC is working on the flyover, like the pinch point. Yeah. But this question seems different than
yeah,
that.
it's more hopeful. Okay, I think if it is that any other questions? So park is open 26th. That's great news. And I think, I'm not sure they'll be programming this summer, but certainly we can, keep our eyes open for that.
Yes,
any other questions?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I know for East Side Coastal Resiliency, we may do some tabling again in the park, while it's open, but I'm not sure what programming, other folks are going to be having there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again for having us.
Okay. I have some good news that we have postponed Lauren's presentation until next month. So it's just, we've had a very long meeting. So my chair's report, next month, we should get an update from the Soloviev group on any more proposal or information on their casino proposal. And we'll hear Lauren. And I think we have a few other issues coming up. Is there any old or new business? Excellent. Seeing no further business, I would like to meet this meeting. If there are no objections, first, we would like to adjourn the meeting. Seeing no further business, the meeting is adjourned at 8:55. Thank you all. I'm sorry it was such a long meeting, but we did accomplish, hopefully. some